science students. It's Miss Schadrie. Today, I am going to go through a lesson on a balanced diet and nutritional diseases. Hide that. So, we have spent the last couple of weeks looking at some different facets of nutrition, looking at the different nutrients and kind of why they're relevant, how they contribute to homeostasis, that really important word we talked about in our body systems unit. And then also looking a little bit at why we feed different things, and then working on creating balanced rations for whatever given nutrient we're trying to focus on. So, we're going to keep moving forward. Our goal for this lesson is to be able to give some examples of nutritional diseases, to be able to discuss some of the different conditions that can be created that increase, or really in some cases, depending on how you look at it, decrease the nutritional needs of an animal, know the difference between deficiencies and toxicities, and have a little bit of idea about how nutritional imbalances can affect the health of animals, which then you are going to continue to explore with your next assignment. So, overview. This we should know by now. Nutrition is important. It's important in the maintenance of good health. It's also important in providing animals the energy they need to survive and thrive. Nutrition affects all animals. Okay, we focus a lot on the production animal standpoint because in animal science production, we have a little bit more control over the range of their diets, and we have, as producers, you spend a lot more time focusing in on nutrition. Whereas pet owners, all of that is really done for us. Like I don't go to the store and look at the different ingredients and mix my own food for Harper. I go to the store and I pick the right bag of cat food that is for her age and her activity level, but all of the balancing is already done. Okay, so while we're really focusing on production animals, it is important to remember that nutrition matters to all animals. And that's not just the animals that we raise, but wild animals too. We just have less effect on that. And then, if an animal has improper nutrition, it's important to be able to recognize that, recognize changes that happen in their appearance, okay, how they look, how they physically act, and that kind of ties into behavior as well. And then we can use some of those signs and symptoms to start to identify what's causing it. It's not always nutrition, but nutrition is a good place to start, partially because it's a really easy thing to fix by changing their diet. And then we can work to correct the problem. Sometimes that's going to require medical intervention. Sometimes we just need to change something so quickly that medicine is the best route. But in a lot of cases, just making adjustments to their diet are going to fix a lot of issues. So, this again is just some overview. So, diet is a term we have been using, we'll continue to use. Diet just refers to what an animal or what a person is usually eating or drinking to get their nutrients. And then, nutrients are those sources of nourishment. They're those six essential items that are found within different foods and different feeds that provide different things for the body, whether that's energy, whether that's the building blocks for tissues, whether that's something to help transport or move nutrients throughout blood vessels. Okay. So, again, diets are composed of nutrients. Not surprising, we've spent the last couple weeks looking at that. And those six different nutrients that we need to have, whether that's a human animal, whether that's a dog, whether that's a snake or a bird or a cow or this cute little horse right here pulling things in this picture. Okay. We also know that the amounts of different nutrients for animals vary based on a lot of factors. The major functions of feed that we talked about, or that you looked at through your notes, involve things like their activities, their production, whether they're pregnant, whether they're producing milk for offspring or for us to use, and species, things like that. Okay, but there are other things that also affect nutrients beyond these big ideas. Okay? So sometimes weather can actually cause a fluctuation in nutrients. And you know that if you've ever been out on a hot Wisconsin day, one of the big things you need more of is water. Okay. Cold weather generally means that animals are going to need more calories because they need to keep warm more. And we animals keep warm by burning calories in their diet. Okay. So we're going to have to increase those especially fats and carbohydrates when it's colder. Parasite infestations, if an animal's got another health issue going on, that can affect their ability to take in nutrients within their digestive tract. So sometimes we need to make changes in order to make sure that they're getting the nutrition they need and not just parasite while we treat the parasite as well. Sometimes animals will have reduced appetites, and so if they won't eat as much volume of food as we want to look at how can we increase the nutrient quality while decreasing the overall amount, kind of like eating a protein bar rather than a three-course meal. You can get a lot of the same nutrients in that one protein bar because it's specially formatted to have lots of calories and lots of protein, lots of vitamins and minerals, rather than having to eat all those different foods. Chronic disease can also play a role in that. So, an animal that has like a long term illness, that can affect their appetite, but it also means that it's that much more important for them to have good nutrition to help continue to stay relatively healthy to be able to deal with the impacts of that health condition. And then age and health are also going to play a role. Animals that are older are generally going to decrease their need for calories over time and certain nutrients. Younger animals are going to need more as they continue to build body tissue and, frankly, expend more energy. And then lots of other health conditions can also affect the kind of nutrients that an animal needs. So, a couple of ideas that are important before we talk about specific nutrients are some general health issues that come from poor diet. So when we talk about animals not getting what they need in their feed, um, it's not just about like strictly how much energy they're getting or how many calories, but it's also about nutrients, and that can create some different problem situations. The first is starvation. We're generally pretty familiar with the concept of starvation. We know what it feels like when we're just I'm hungry. We know about hunger in the world and people who don't get enough food to eat. Starvation, whether that's humans, animals, or frankly plants as well, it's just looking at the fact that they're not getting enough calories. They're not meeting their maintenance requirement, first and foremost, to be able to sustain their body as is while still running all of their functions like their heartbeat and their breathing and their digestion processes, etc. Okay? So starvation just means whatever food they're getting, it's not enough to meet that maintenance requirement. Okay, let alone do anything else, but they still have to maybe do other stuff like go find food. So they're typically losing weight, losing body mass. You can see that in this poor dog in this picture over here. We also have something called malnourishment. Malnourishment means that an animal is not getting enough nutrients. Sometimes that means that they're getting enough calories, like they're eating enough stuff, they're getting enough energy, but they're not getting maybe enough protein or enough fat. In some cases, and in many cases, unfortunately, we see these two go together, where an animal will both be malnourished but then also be starving. But we don't necessarily always see that. When we talk about humans and things like food deserts or areas in large cities where you don't have access to like grocery stores and things, we'll see a lot of people who are getting enough calories. They're not starving, but they are malnourished. They're not getting enough vitamins. They're not getting enough minerals because they don't have access to good quality foods that give them all the stuff they need, but they are getting enough food itself. Okay? So those are two important terms to kind of understand that they can be different or they are different, but they can also be related to one another. It's very likely that an organism that's starving is also going to be malnourished because if they're not getting enough calories, they're probably also not getting enough vitamins, minerals, protein, fats, carbs, water, what have you. Okay. Major symptoms that let us know that an animal has a nutritional imbalance of some kind, whether that's malnourishment or whether that's starvation, are going to be things like, especially changes in body weight. That's the big one. If they're thin in appearance, if their bones are particularly prominent. Again, in this image, you can see all of the ribs of this dog along the side. Um, those are generally indications that something is wrong. Now, there are some breeds of animals where that is more common to see some bones. Things like a greyhound. Greyhounds are a breed of dog that are supposed to be very lean. So you can see a little bit more definition of their skeletal system. Dairy cattle are another really good example of this. Okay, dairy cattle, If you've ever gone to a county fair, you've looked at some of our pictures and some of our lessons throughout the year. Dairy cattle are meant to have a more pronounced frame. You're supposed to see a little bit of their bone because they put a lot of their energy into milk production. And as long as they're doing good milk production, okay, that generally indicates to us that they're still healthy. And that's very different from beef cattle, where if you see the bones of a beef cow, okay, or a beef steer, that animal's not getting enough food. But if you see, like, especially like the hip bones on a dairy cow, that's super normal. Um, Changes in coat are another really good indication if the frame isn't conclusive or if it's a breed where, again, you might expect to see more lean appearance, more protruding of some of the bones. Then looking at the coat is a really good indication of whether or not that animal's healthy. So you can look at, is it shiny? Is it smooth? If it's shiny, it's smooth, they're probably fine. Okay. Or they aren't progressing enough that we're concerned yet. But if the coat's starting to look dull and rough in appearance, starting to look kind of shaggy, maybe they're shedding a lot, you're seeing a lot of dander, those can be indications that there's definitely something going on. And then activity is another big one. Obviously, if you're not getting enough to meet your maintenance requirements, that animal's not going to be super active. They might have muscle weakness. They might seem kind of sad and depressed. They're not doing their usual behaviors. And so those are all going to be indications that something is dietarily wrong. Now, there are also lots of other health conditions that can cause some of these issues, and that's why it's important to be mindful and to keep an eye on your animal over a long period of time. If you see some of these things and you try changing their diet or you just try monitoring their diet a little bit more first, okay, you can kind of weed out, is this a food issue or is this something else? And it very well could be. Um, when we look at nutrient specific diseases, that idea of malnourishment, there are two major conditions, types of conditions or categories of conditions that we look at. So the first one is called a toxicity. Toxicity is any condition where an animal is getting too much of a particular nutrient. Yeah, there are lots of different health conditions that fall under toxicity, but in a broad spectrum, it just means that for some nutrient or maybe multiple nutrients, the animal is getting too much in their diet. Okay, you guys were supposed to watch last week a video where a little boy eats a ton of gummy vitamins for a long period of time. Okay, he definitely develops a vitamin toxicity. He's getting too much of quite a few vitamins, and that causes a lot of different health problems. Okay. It's also important when we look at vitamins. Okay. You read at the beginning of this unit that there's two major categories of vitamins, there's fat soluble and there's water soluble. It's really hard to get a toxicity of water soluble vitamins. Why? Because of the way that they get stored in the body. Water soluble vitamins, when they get broken by that down by the digestive system, get taken into the bloodstream and they get stored in the liquid in the body. And when you have too much liquid in the body, what does an animal do? It pees, right? So it's really hard to have a buildup of too many water soluble nutrients, or excuse me, water soluble vitamins like vitamin C and vitamin E. That's a lie. Vitamin C and vitamin B, excuse me, because they just get flushed out in an animal's urine. Fat soluble vitamins, however, A, D, E, and K, an animal can get a toxicity on because those get stored in the fat cells and those don't go away or burn up easily. So over time, an animal can accumulate too many of those vitamins and can make them very sick. But not just vitamins, you can get a toxicity of anything. An animal could potentially drink too much water and get water toxicity. That's not super common in animals because animals usually have the good sense to stop drinking when they're not thirsty, but it has happened in humans. Some of you know, have probably heard this story about the radio contest where they were trying to like chug water, I think, to win like concert tickets, and one of the participants died. Water toxicity. Had too much water, ruptured her cells, caused that person to die. Again, not super common. Most of us, if we're drinking so much water, we're going to start peeing a lot. Same for an animal, but it can happen. The opposite of a toxicity is a deficiency. And a deficiency occurs when they have too little of a nutrient. So, for whatever reason, poorly balanced diet, etc., they're not eating enough of something. Okay. We know about an example of deficiency because we heard lots of people sharing their GMO speeches mentioning golden rice. Vitamin A is a pretty common vitamin deficiency in some parts of the world, um, depending on what dietary things they have access to. Places where they eat a lot of rice in their diet often because it's a big calorie increaser, but rice doesn't have a ton of vitamins and minerals. So while again you're getting lots of calories, you're not starving. Maybe you can still be malnourished. And so, in lots of places in the world, it's hard to get enough vitamin A. That deficiency can cause things like blindness. And so we have created golden rice, which is fortified with excess vitamin A to make sure that people get enough of that nutrient. Okay. So, toxicity, you can think of as too much, toxic, too much of something. If somebody's a toxic person, they're just too much. And then deficiency, you're deficient, you're not getting enough of that thing. Okay. There's lots of different health conditions that fall within these two topics. And that's really what you're going to spend your next couple days of class doing is choosing a nutritionally related health problem, a toxicity or a deficiency, and then learning about the effects of that on an animal. How would you fix it? How does it develop? How might you identify it, etc. So, if you have any questions about this lesson, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, tune in tomorrow to pick your health condition and look forward to seeing what you learn.